Good evening, everyone. So the Tuesday talk, potentially the last Tuesday talk in terms of the name. So as I was just saying, I may have to change. Well, I should change the name. I actually don't know why I called it the Tuesday talk in the first place, because I had to come up with a name really. I was putting it on really quickly, and I thought, what should I call it? I don't know. And I'm a sucker for alliteration, so I thought we'll do it on Tuesday. We'll call it the Tuesday talk. But I shall change it for practical reasons. First of all, because as I'm in the process of looking at other guilds, if I end up in a guild that raids on Tuesday, obviously it can't be on a Tuesday. I can't exactly just move it to, say, a Monday and still call it the Tuesday talk. So even if I still end up doing it on a Tuesday, I think I should probably change the name anyway. So I had a few thoughts. I quite like the idea, although none of these satisfy that, of puns or alliteration, but I couldn't think of any. So the few I'm thinking of at the moment, of course, other people, if they've got any thoughts. I'm not going to obviously occupy this discussion with it. So, you know, if anyone has any thoughts, you know, I'll just throw them in there. Weekly WoW discussion. I think that was something a bit more interesting than that. But we'll put them in there, and I might sort of make a note of it. But we'll not obviously we'll discuss any WoW things that people want to talk about at the moment. But hi Mustex, hi Aventus. So the three I was thinking at the moment are the WoW Exchange, the Azeroth Review, or Council of Azeroth. I don't think the last one makes. I don't know. So those are the few at the moment. So what I'm likely to do is think about if anyone comes up with anything different, put it in there. And then maybe just throw it out for a poll or something on Twitter. But onto actual World of Warcraft stuff. And again, you know, so if anyone is new here, then let me know. And anything you want to talk about World of Warcraft wise or Warcraft wise is absolutely fine. We try and steer onto topics that are sort of more general information. As opposed to sort of the more niche ones, which I tend to do in individual ones. So, I mean, it could be, I don't know what other people think. My mind at the moment is on Antorus and thinking about, you know, why is it that Blizzard still haven't changed anything? Oh, hi, Don. Yes, you're the first person to speak. Well, yes, I don't know why Blizzard haven't made any changes. I'm sort of now thinking maybe they're not going to. Maybe they're going to keep the set bonuses as they are, which is a little bit surprising to me. Because I think for my spec at least, I would quite like them as they are now. Hi, Kisasha. Maybe they know something I don't about them. Maybe I need to rerun the Sims again. Because the way it was looking, obviously when the item level goes up, you sort of switch over. But if you need, and it'd be quite good, because if you need to get 4 sets, it's quite difficult to get that really quickly, unless they're going to funnel it into you. But in particular, I would have difficulty getting 4 set quickly in Antorus. One, I'm looking to change guild, so obviously in a new guild, they're hardly going to give me stuff over the established raiders. So I just have to get lucky with coins. I might get lucky with coins and get 2 pieces of tier. The other problem is that next Wednesday I have another work evening event, which means that I would get back late at the very least. So I would miss out on the initial farming. And if I end up joining a guild that doesn't do split raids, I'm going to miss out on a lot. On a lot. Well, Avantis, this is my worry if it's the fact that, you know, if there is an issue that Blizzard should have really dealt with and they don't deal with it and they just think it's fine, we'll deal with it. Well, maybe they're thinking to themselves, they've done this before, we'll wait for some proper live data, because this is the argument they use. We'll wait for a lot of live data, see how it looks, and then make changes. The problem is that those changes will inevitably be either a buff or a nerf. So for the people who get buffed, in a way they'll be quite pleased, but in another way not, because it's like, well, maybe they were considered not that good in the first week or two, and that sort of affects the mood for the rest of the tier. And if they get a nerf, obviously no one's happy with a nerf. So look, Balance and a few other class specs right now are using tier 20 4-piece through all of Antorus. Well, that is exactly the sort of thing that Blizzard said they don't want. And they don't even want you to use 2-set tier 20, sorry. So this, yeah. Now, the other thing is what they did with the Nighthold tier. For any set bonuses that were particularly good, is they nerfed them a bit. So what you would expect when Antorus comes out is that they're going to nerf some tier 20 just to make the tier 21 look better. The issue is that they haven't said anything about this yet. You know, it's not going on the PTR. I'm sure, even if I hadn't seen it, I'm sure someone would have told me. Hi, Midget. Changes the day before Mythic drops is indeed frustrating because, again, you know, planning. It's particularly ridiculous. You still wear 4-piece tier 19? No, Wolf Casual Raging. Okay. I thought you were doing that because there are. I think there were some. I think our Resto Druid was like saying, for example, that the tier 20 wasn't that great until it got really high item level, of course, and the tier 19 was a bit better. I think was there a thing with one of the DK specs as well, where or was it Rogues? Maybe it might have been both, where the tier 19 was still even at, you know, was still a lot better than the tier 20 until, as I say, the item level outstripped it. But I mean, with me, yeah, they nerfed the tier 19 2-set bonus. Still ended up using it. In fact, until very recently, like for most of 2, I was using 2-piece tier 19 along with 4-piece tier 20 because, you know, it was quite good. And then it was actually quite funny because a period, I can't remember what it was now, a bit over a month ago maybe, and it changed. I all of a sudden got some pieces that just sneaked me over on Sims, and I thought, well, let's just do it. Let's just go for it. And then straight away, I got a Titan Forge piece of tier 19, and then it's back to tier 19 again. So it's only recently I've even swapped that out now, and I've completely finished with the tier 19. You can actually get 955 tier 19. Well, you can, yes. You're unlikely to. The thing is, though, if anyone did, let's say they got 2 pieces of not even 955, but let's say 950 even or something, or 945. Tier 19, it opens up the possibility of 2-piece plus 2-piece plus 2-piece. Blizzard definitely don't want that. They don't want that. Yeah, I don't know what the chances are. They may be shorter chances. Depends on the lottery, doesn't it? But yeah, the chances of getting, you know, tier 19 Titan Forge and all that way up are slim. It's possible, of course. The chances of getting 2. You would be a lucky bunny, I suppose, to the point where I don't think Blizzard have to worry too much about it. But and of course, in Antorus comes out, it could Titan Forge up even more, presumably. So the other thing is as well having to decide which legendaries to upgrade. Also, I think I've heard this said. I think this happened last time as well, because when Antorus comes out, getting up to plus 15 will give you better gear from the weekly cache. I think it was confirmed that if you do the plus 15 next week, then you can get it out of your weekly cache when Antorus goes live. I'm not 100% on that. I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty like 90% sure. So I think it's worth doing the plus 15 if you don't habitually do it anyway. I mean, I happen to do a plus 15 this week, for example, but just by random chance. Because for quite a while now, I've tended only to really do one Mythic Plus dungeon. If people have asked to do others, then, you know, and I'll do them. But I've generally only tried to make sure that I've done one myself. And so next week, yeah, I'll be trying to get a tier, what do you call it? A plus 15 done. I'll have to see how easy that's going to be. I also have to try and I don't even know, like I've got to set up all my profiles, and I've got to remember to actually save my profiles this time, because if I transfer server, just like when I reset Windows, all my profiles disappear. So I need to save those so I can take them with me, as I am very likely to have to go Horde and live in boring buildings. I don't even want to go back to Orgrimmar. I hate Orgrimmar, and yet this is the worst of it. I like Undercity. I would generally hang out in Undercity if I could. But I know that Undercity's going to get bombed soon, so that's not great. In before we get the worst Mythic Plus affixes next week. I don't know what it is next week, but shouldn't we know roundabout now? Because whatever it is next week, North America has now. So this time last week, North America still wasn't live because there was some issue with patching, wasn't there, with the vanilla world bosses. There you go. Tyrannical bolstering explode. I hate explosive. Tyrannical. I don't suppose that's too bad. I guess that's not too bad. Bolstering explosive and fortified, I think, would be worse. Depends on the dungeon. Let's have a look. How can Blizzard address community perceptions of unviable specs? It is difficult. There are some things, like perceptions that may be false perceptions, that exist in the community that I think Blizzard can do more about instead of just washing their hands and going, well, it's not our fault. Spec perceptions, I think, is a tricky one, though. It's not an easy thing. So, yeah, been playing Arcane Mage the entire expansion, been kicked out of both pug raids, had a difficult time to get into raiding guilds and Mythic Plus due to not being fire or frost. The problem is, at a certain level, like when you're way behind the main progress curve, player skill will count for more than like spec and gear to a certain extent. So it is a bigger problem. I mean, this is why I sort of fear for people in heroic guilds, because, you know, you can... the people who will make these decisions will know less than most. So they just go off like the top guilds. They just assume that it's all the same thing. And it's not at all. But I don't... I mean, Blizzard will always just say everything's balanced anyway. It's just that they say it when it's clearly not true. And therefore, no one believes them. That's the problem. So I don't think there's, on that particular issue, there's a lot Blizzard can do about it. Your best bet is just to get into a guild and do the stuff rather than pug, ultimately. And that's the, you know, for any group PvE, that's generally what you want to do anyway. Even though there are more tools now in the game for people who want to pug, it's always better to do it in a guild group or a friend group or something like that. You just open your cache to an 18 Hall of Valor Tyrannical. You coward. What's wrong with that? I'd do that. The trash isn't too bad as well for the old explosive. Where would be the... I suppose the worst trash would be going towards the second boss. But other than that, no, I'd do that. Feral Druids and Survival Hunters. Feral Druids are in a better place now, though, aren't they? Because, I mean, I know there's a Feral Druid in our guild who was a very good one, and he was always able to do, like, top damage, even before the Feral changes. But, you know, I think I got the impression that there were very few Ferals, really, in the world that really knew how to do it well. But with the changes, I think, to do reasonable damage, I think it was made a little bit more accessible. Hi, Pinky Tiger. And look, find a guild. Not yet. Excuse me, no. I've started to narrow down a little bit more. I just think it's just a bad time. I think I might have blown it, really. There don't seem to be people looking at the moment, which is annoying because I'm quite certain in a few weeks they will be, but at the moment they're not. And it'll probably be too late then. But yeah, so I mean, Survival Hunters. Again, Survival Hunters are very, very good, especially in Mythic Plus. Again, it's one of those where they have to be played well, though. You know, you have to learn how to play them well. Kasasha, well, any spec takes a lot of skill to play. I know what you mean about optimal spec, because there's several specs that have a particular talent that it's like, you would use this if you are really, really good. But in actual fact, you'll do more damage if you use the more passive versions, if not. But I get the impression, without having played the Feral, that the changes they made eased it a little bit. They made it a little bit easier, for a little more accessible. Obviously, to do the best damage, it's still going to be the most skillful people doing it, as with any spec. Web working the entire expansion to show your knowledge and skill through logs, and haven't got into a mythic cutting edge guild. It is sometimes very difficult, but in a mythic cutting edge guild, you are going to have to accept the fact you will have to be able to play all specs for your class of the same role. So as a mage, you are expected to be able to play all specs and use whichever one is the strongest on the fight. Because even though you might say that you outperform people playing fire, that's only because you're better than them. If you came up against a fire mage who plays mage as well as you do arcane, they will beat you on these fights. And the issue is, because sometimes people are even wary, like everyone will always be wary of accepting someone who says they're a particular spec as opposed to a particular class. So, I mean, let's just think of an example. Say Affliction Warlock, really, really strong single target. So let's say someone came as an Affliction Warlock and they can't really play the other specs. You might sort of say, well, that's okay because Affliction's really strong, so that's fine. But there'd always be a little bit of wariness, because what if something changed? What if in the next tier, Affliction was actually fell behind the others significantly? You'd sort of want them to be playing one of the others. Is there any reason that on your first monitor you've got WoW, and your second monitor you've got Twitch, blah, 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 but when you play WoW on your second monitor it freezes so you can't use it? But then when browsing the internet it doesn't freeze. I don't know, Pinky. I've not come across... I mean, I've come across any number of technical problems, which I always put down to Windows 10, and I think I was proved right last week. But I've not had that one, and if I did, I really wouldn't know what to do about it myself either, other than switch the monitors around if that's the issue. Well, you say you had to do some quests in Suramar to be able to buy the crystal from the vendors for the epic mount. I mean, do people know, for example, that if you want to be able to, with the allied races, if you want to be able to get, what's it called now, Nightfallen, for if you're a Horde player, then you're going to have to go through the Suramar questline to do it. And they didn't give the impression that that's just for this expansion. So let's say you're a new player in the next expansion, to be able to do Nightfall, and you will still have to do the Suramar storyline. So if anyone has any ambitions to do that, then you want to get... you want to make sure you've got the Suramar... I mean, you have to do most of the Suramar questline anyway to get flying, don't you? Oh, you mean on that specific character? Oh, yeah, I mean, that's something that's really... I haven't done Suramar really on other class. Like, I have... like my Rogue, for example, which I use for Split Raid, so that's my better geared alt. Hasn't done Suramar at all. If I went to Suramar, there's nothing there. I haven't even got started on it, really. Well, I've got the very, very start of it, and that's it. Does that mean if you do the Suramar stuff on Alliance, does it count as I can get Nightborn or not? It's a good question. I assume so, because it's on that account, isn't it? You know, that account, someone has got that achievement, so it should be fine. It was really weird, because when it was on the Q&A, wasn't it? And they were saying, you know, that in theory, what you actually need, or, you know, what you technically need is Exalted with Nightfallen. But they said, in reality, what you need to do is to play through the Suramar questline. I don't know how far into it. So we'll just have to see how it works in practice. But that, you know, that's what I'm getting is make sure you've done the Suramar questline. What's my opinion of Honor Buddy? So that was a botting program, was it? I've heard of it, but I can't say what it is exactly. So a botting program, you've given me that. Do you think it will change a lot of price on materials in the auction house once botters' keys run out? I don't know what effect botting has on the economy at the moment, so I can't really say that. It's probably got different effects on different realms. Obviously, where there's a significant effect on an economy in a particular realm, then it would have an effect, yes, because all of a sudden, you know, the supply will go down, the demand will stay largely the same. I mean, you know, you could argue it'd be interesting to see if it did have a massive effect on the economy. You would probably find out. Do you notice how all the chat channels are spammed by bots who advertise a particular boosting site? No, I don't get that where I am on the Maelstrom. I haven't seen for a couple of expansions, actually. I would say, I can't remember even the last time when I saw a significant number of botting activity. But I think I would say that when the WoW token came in, I think it was successful to a certain extent. Obviously, that didn't prevent bots. But I would say that that prevented like gold selling type spam. But so boosting sites and stuff like that, I haven't really seen too many adverts for it. So maybe there are some realms where it's still going on a lot more than others. Are there any classes that were mediocre in TOS that are tipping to perform well in Antorus? Yes, Retribution Paladins. Unless they are really, really mean, proper Grinchers, then at the moment Retribution Paladins are looking very good, I am told. I can't speak from experience because I haven't experienced the raiding on the PTR. I'm not joined in looking for group. Very likely not, no. Silvermoon, I suppose, is a large one. You could also argue maybe they target larger realms. Feral Druids are already really strong. I can't see how Feral Druids would make a big leap because, as I say, the Feral Druid we have, who took a little bit of a break, but he's going back in Antorus, he did top damage. When I say top damage, I mean top damage. So if they made it so that you... I mean, if they just made it so... If you think, imagine this, the top end, where the very best players can achieve. And if you imagine, let's say, here is where most people can manage. Now, if all they're going to do is raise this bar, then that's okay, fine. You might see the average performances go up. But if they're going to do anything that can be taken advantage by the already best players, that would make them overpowered. So I can't see that being the case. Balance is balance. I mean, balance has been pretty good throughout Legion, but certainly balance is looking good in Antorus as well. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Retribution Paladins are also pretty good at switching between, say, single target and AOE. The boost to the judge. Again, unless they nerf the hell out of the judgment bonus on my tier, that's going to provide a very nice and welcome boost to mastery. So, I mean, I mean, don't even talk about the tower defense fight, really. But yeah, I mean, I'm steeling myself for the gimmicky fights. I'm not keen on gimmicky fights. Can't be doing with them. And I also know there's going to be a massive amount of RP because when they data mined the dialogue associated with Argus, in particular the Aftermath, there's so much of it. And I know most of it won't be in the raid itself. It'll probably be quests that you do afterwards or something. But there's so much of it. Illidan just goes on and on and on. It's like, here's a message for my brother. Here's a message for Tyrande. Blah, blah, blah. And then you have to go to them and play the message and listen to this rubbish. And it goes on for ages. So much crap. No one even likes Malfurion. I don't know why he's sending him a message. Tower defense fight looks like it'll be worse than Kill Jade for LFR. The main problem in my experience, I haven't done LFR Kill Jade that much. I mean, my experience, the main problem with it was the transition to the Illidan phase. If it coincided with reflections, that was really bad and you would all die. And if it didn't, then it was fine usually. That's the only thing I've ever wiped on LFR Kill Jaden, but well, the thing, Midger, is if you're talking about normal TOS, then obviously that's not the, you know, cutting edge guilds will only be doing that for getting tier quickly. So you'd be expected to go burst through heroic and normal really quickly, and then the next week be doing mythic. You can abandon the Antorus campaign mission quests that award super high AP, and then take them again and do them for super nice rewards forever. Hang on a minute. Can you? I didn't know that. That sounds like something that shouldn't happen. Hi, Mahal. So, well, it's too late for me now. I've done them. I think, unless there's another one coming. So, you complete the mission and then abandon the quest, and they just give you the quest again. I didn't realise that. Oh my god, really? I wish I'd known about that. I wouldn't have to do all these rubbish world quests all the time. Or not as many. Or maybe I'd already be 75. I'll be getting 75 next week. Ah. That's pretty weird. You'd have thought someone would have mentioned that by now, wouldn't you? But I don't know. I mean, we'll have to see if even that sort of thing is in next expansion, because didn't they? I think they said, I can't remember now. They said something about like the Order Hall mission stuff that seemed to get me thinking that maybe they don't plan to do theirs next expansion. I seem to remember them saying something that got me surprised. Kill Jaden Progress is dead in the water. The guild killed it, but they killed it when I was at work, so that's it, finished. Well, if it works after so many weeks and no one said anything about it, like to the point where Blizzard responded, then I don't see why you would expect to fix any day. But it might be too late for me now, because I say I've done them all. Is Desolate Host tough on Mythic? No, it's one of the easier bosses, really. I mean, it might take some practice, you know, for people to get used to the stuff. But there isn't actually a lot different to Heroic other than it being more brutal. There's only really one extra thing on it. Although the way you deal with things is a little different sometimes. 3.4 billion. If it's just passively every 12 hours as an extra, I think that's all right. I wouldn't complain about that. Yeah, I need... What do I need for 75? I need about 160 billion now. Oh yeah, for alts if they're gearing up your champions as well, definitely. Why don't I stay in the guild? Because it's a bit cheeky. I don't think it's very nice behaviour when you know you're leaving a guild. I think you should sort of say, rather than fight. Because as soon as you find somewhere, you're basically having to transfer there pretty much straight away. So I don't like the idea of just going, right, I'm off, see you later. How do I think they should balance Mythic Plus on the topic of Mythic Plus versus Raid next expansion? Well, they seem to think they already... It depends what you mean by balance. Obviously, raiding has to give the better rewards. They're doing that anyway. They've said as much because of the greater organisation required of it. But I would just say, just simply because it's the more epic content. You know, you don't, you know, progressing on like Mythic Plus is just doing the same dungeons but a bit harder, a bit harder, a bit harder. You know, which is fun in its way, but it's not the same thing as on like a raid boss where you're just wiping and wiping over and over again until you get it done. I'm very likely to have to go Horde. How come? I've probably said it quite a lot of times. White Claw. It's a dual thing, really. And one is that I just couldn't recruit people that I wanted to recruit. Like most of the people are fine, but there's just a significant number that just don't get the learn mechanics over DPS phase, and then you kill it all quicker. Like the people in it, they play their class as well as anyone in much higher progress skills. The only difference is they're not doing the tactics right. So it takes so long to learn the mechanics because they're always favouring DPS over mechanics, which means it takes you longer to learn mechanics, of course. So I wasn't able to recruit enough people, should we say, with the right mindset. And now it's not worth me spending the time on it. I haven't been able to find anyone of any kind for some time. So it's just not worth it anymore. I don't want to do that. So that means I don't want to do my role in the guild. And the second side of it is, although I'm okay with a much lower rank than I've been used to for the past few years, I'm not happy about it, but I'm okay with it. The absolute minimum, I insist on, the absolute minimum. I'm not one of the best paladins in the world. The absolute minimum is cutting edge. If I don't get cutting edge, that's below the minimum expected. Paladins are great in Taurus, but not necessarily everyone knows that. Again, it comes to this perception thing, doesn't it? I'm not looking for a top 50 guild, and I wouldn't get into a top 50 guild. Have I ever failed a trial? No. There's always the first time, though. I'm never arrogant about it. I always go in wondering if this is going to be the time when I do. But no. But, you know, inevitably as time goes on, you might expect to have to sort of drop down a little bit in the world rankings. But I will never drop below getting cutting edge. Otherwise, it's just not worth. There's a significant amount of time and effort that I put into raiding that isn't worth it if you're not going to get that achievement. So, have I ever left a guild after a week of raiding because the atmosphere wasn't pleasant? Not after a week, no. I have left guilds because they were unpleasant, but not after such a short time. I would always give it, you know. I mean, I'm sort of okay. I'd like, you know, and one of the questions I always ask of a guild is, what is the atmosphere like? But because it is important, it is nice to have a friendly atmosphere. But you know, if there are toxic elements in it, it's water off a duck's back to me. I will give as good as I get. But it's still, yeah, it is not nice. But it certainly wouldn't make me leave. I might eventually leave if I think it's also affecting the enjoyment of the game. Because obviously it is a game. You have to accept it's a game. You know, it wouldn't be, I mean, as I say, it would be deeply disappointed if I ended up not raiding Mythic and Taurus. But it's, you know, it's not desperate. It would mean I'd have to rethink some of the content I'll be doing on the channel. But I think, you know, there's not many YouTubers do regular content about WoW that raid anyway. There's only like Asmongold and I suppose Preach a little bit. He's a drop-in raider though, really. I think Asmongold's the only one who really gets involved. You joined one of those swearing, calling you names for not taking a shortcut that no other guilds would take in no-held. I just give them back. I would just give them back because I mean, I remember the best argument I ever had Because there have been a couple of times when, as a trial, I'm not going to say a couple of times, and the last time was some years ago. Maybe I've mellowed since. But where I've been on trial and someone's said something stupid and I've had a proper go at them. And one time, I was saying this on the stream yesterday, I think. It was in TBC and it was to the guild master. Try giving me shit over something and I have a proper go at him. And I was in the right. Wasn't just, and that was that. And it was accepted, so it was fine. Passed my trial, no problem. Didn't have any more trouble from them. No, DPS over mechanics. It's nice to think that it's only affecting low DPS players, but it's not. There are plenty of very, very good players who do that as well. Because sometimes the reason they're very, very good players is because they spend so much time practicing their craft. And that includes when they're supposed to be doing mechanics instead of DPS. So no, it'd be nice to think about that. But there are plenty of very good players who will do that as well. And sometimes you get away with it. Like it's not that you can't have DPS horse in a raid. You can have some, but the mechanics need to be done. And on some fights, it only needs a few people to do the mechanics. And as long as you've got a few people sacrificing their own personal DPS, the only problem then comes when someone turns around and says, "Oh, why are your percentiles so crap?" And it's like, because I'm doing the jobs that you're not doing. But there are other fights where basically everyone has to do their job, or where it's a randomly targeted person that has to do a thing. And then in that situation, those sort of players sometimes don't do it, so you just know you're going to wipe. You just have to hope. Sometimes you get on bosses where you just have to hope that certain people don't get a particular mechanic. I remember in Hellfire Citadel, in the guild I was in first. Basically, I was in 3 different guilds in Hellfire Citadel. That was a bad time for me. But in the guild I was mostly in there, we were doing, God, I've forgotten the name, the Eridar. Valhari. And on the last phase, ranged can get that circly thing and they have to get out of the way by clicking on a Warlock portal. Because you can't really run out the way in time and you just kill a load of people. So there's one particular mage who was always top DPS on that fight. But whenever he got this ability in phase 3, 0% of the time did he successfully click that gateway. He was totally incapable. Every time. Now I was thinking to myself, if I was the raid leader, I'd be benching this guy, because I can imagine the people who are actually on the bench listening to this and thinking, this guy is cocking it up every single time. Why is he in and why are we on the bench? I'd be furious at that. Absolutely furious. But he didn't. You know, this may... In fact, the raid leader even blew up and said, "Oh, it's fine," really sarcastically, of course. "It's fine, no problem. We know that every time you get that ability, we're just going to wipe. We'll just have to wait for you not to get that ability to kill this boss." And I was thinking, what a strange thing to say. Bench him. So anyway, yeah. So there are those people that are perfectly capable of doing really stunning DPS, but yeah, they're just, you know, they will just fail those mechanics. Or it'll take so many pulls for them to learn it, because they're learning much more slowly, because they're not giving enough of their brain over to it. Do you mean Loktar Ragar? Never mind that. If I do go Horde, it's as a Blood Elf. I would actually... Orcs are actually... Because I was thinking about it, because I sort of accept now that I'm almost certain to... Unless some Super Alliance guild comes out the woodwork and says, "Oh, you're just the person we want." But I haven't had any approaches from any suitable guilds. So I'm not expecting that. And there's non-advertising. But, so if I have to go Horde, there are quite a lot of my alts that would be Orcs, because I think Orcs are good for warriors. I'm not talking in terms of their racials, I just mean in terms of what they look like. So, you know, if I had warrior, I would probably... Actually, no, I'd still probably keep it a Pandaren. I really like the Pandaren stance with using weapons, two-handed weapons. No, maybe still Pandaren. But in theory, it should be Orc. What else? Orc Shaman, so Shamans. No, Orcs can't be Paladins. I wouldn't really want an Orc Paladin, I don't think. I mean, Undead Paladin, I can accept. I've forgotten now everything. Orc Warlock, I would, you know, be happy with an Orc Warlock. Tauren Monk. No, no, no. No. Pandaren Monk. Well, yes, I'd be much more like a Pandaren as well in that regards. But when I have Pandaren, they're always female Pandaren. I can't be doing like the male Pandaren suffers from the same problem as male Draenei and getting stuck indoors. I can do without that embarrassment. But things like Tauren monks are supposed to be agile. There's nothing agile about a Tauren. It's a bit like, you know, you get certain things like orc rogues and stuff. It's like, why? Why is that even a thing? Thrall was not a paladin to begin with. It looks like Hammer of Wrath, but it wasn't holy, therefore it wasn't. Also, it failed. I hope you'll note. Manaroth just laughed it off. Hang on, what am I? Oh, for goodness sake, where's my... There we go. Scrolling up, what am I missing? DPS checks quite soft. Yeah, the thing with... Yeah, Timothy Sargeras, I was actually using it as an example in an application that I was writing. Like, take Mythic Kil'jaeden, for example. Now, in the first phase, all you have to do is transition before... after the Wailing ad, but before the next Armageddon, and preferably before the Fell Claws on the tank. Now, if you're going to do that, it really doesn't matter if you push the damage and do it a few seconds earlier. It doesn't matter. So, for example, I would quite happily, you know, at the start when I've popped wings and I'm doing DPS, if I wanted to go out and soak, I would just go out and soak. I'd be totally fine with that. Because the next Armageddon, I'm not so good at soaking because I'm not one of the more mobile classes. So I didn't prefer to soak that one anyway. And it doesn't mind. It's ruinous for my own DPS. Absolutely terrible for my personal damage. But no problem at all for the fight. Because let's say I did enough damage to even transition it a second or two early, which would be spectacular. Makes no difference. Did I draw? No, I can't draw. I am incompetent at drawing. I got someone else to draw me that. You go Tauren Monk for the sake of planting hooves in people's faces. They would see you coming a mile off, though. If I can't get into a guild, will I just raid Heroic for the time being? I don't know. I suppose so. I suppose I would just... but, you know, we'll just have to see what happens. But, sweat roll. Tauren, yeah, well, the thing is that Tauren changed their shape with Feral. So you're sort of okay. Even then, their horns must get stuck on some things. I refuse to believe that they don't get stuck now and then on things. Well, there's Retribution Paladin. I mean, as Blizzard keeps saying, they are a popular spec. Most, like, generally speaking, guilds that have them, or want them, I should say, have them. It's not difficult to find a Retribution Paladin. Would I focus on high Mythic Plus? No, raiding is what I want. The Mythic Plus is a nice piece of content. I'm not going to criticise it, but it's not something that would keep me interested for long. Like, I don't mind spending an evening doing it, or an afternoon, or a weekend, if I had a group, if there was a group of people that said, let's do this. But I don't want to do it like day after day. Have I made many applications? No. I would never apply to more than one guild at a time anyway. And there isn't the desperate need, because there is another week to go. Because I don't think it would be suitable, for example, doing Mythic Tomb of Sargeras with a new guild next week. Because, first of all, they'll do everything very differently. But I'm used to doing it a particular way. So autopilot may cause problems. You know, there's no danger of me impressing at all, because how could I? Because I can't possibly do as well, because I won't know the timings or anything like that. I'll be constantly having to think, oh, what do we do here? How do they do it? I'm not going to mention names of guilds yet until I'm in one. And so, yeah, I can't possibly do brilliantly in it in the first week. All I can possibly do is annoy someone if I get them killed or wipe the raid when someone was having a really good pull. So it's an absolute loser. You don't even have the benefit of being... they wouldn't bring me on Mythic Kill Jaden anyway. And I'd be hesitant. If they even asked me, I would probably say that's not a good idea. Because if they do it, easily get yourself killed or others killed. Like someone could say that the singularity is coming from Star, say. So I race over to where I think Star is based on the old guild, and they've put it in a different place. I've gone the wrong way, haven't I? Blown off instantly. I look like a right tool. Oh, you've got school mucking about with you as well, Pinky. Yeah, well, I have work mucking about. Next Wednesday, I have an evening. It's a late one as well. It's not even like the parents' evening. I could be a little bit late for the raid. This one is a proper late one. You're torn being playing Warrior and Paladin. It is always a risk. Any single DPS spec is always a bit of a risk. So... yeah, the light's not really respected though, Kisashi. That's the problem. Like, you look at certain things. So take like some of the Netherlight Crucible abilities. You know, the ones that do shadow damage? Well, there are... is it Unholy, whose mastery means extra shadow damage? And that's the thing. Some specs, their mastery means does more of this particular type of damage. And most schools of magic, at some point or other, crop up in a trinket or some other effect, and your mastery will then buff that effect. So what might be a really good trinket or other effect can actually be extra good in the hands of that particular spec because their mastery buffs it. Nothing gives out holy damage. Nothing. And anyway, our mastery doesn't even buff holy damage, thank you very much. We don't even get that. You know? So... the light is totally, you know, not at all respected. Affliction has traits that increase shadow damage by flight. Well, they have it as well. Well, there you go. Wasn't holy damage the only irresistible one in vanilla? Was it? I don't remember. I don't remember. There was certainly no gear that had holy resistance on it. Like, you'd have gear that would have fire resistance or frost resistance or shadow resistance or nature resistance. There was nothing with holy resistance on it because there were no bosses that did holy damage. But if you had... so maybe... so it would be more difficult to resist it because you wouldn't have the... but some people wouldn't wear resistance gear anyway. But I don't know that it was... so I think it was only for that reason, just that there was no gear with it on. Because there were no bosses that did holy damage, so there was no point in it. You don't have evil bosses doing light damage. Until very recently, where we now do. Actually, has there ever been a boss that did holy damage? Can't remember. There may have been, I just can't remember. Yes, there were holy protection potions, granted, yeah. So alchemists had, there were protection potions for all schools of magic. Am I in a rush to... well, you say the next raid will be out for 3 or 4 months. The thing is, if I'm going to get it completed in 4 months, I need to be on the ground floor. Once the first few bosses have been completed on Mythic, you don't really... there comes a point, after a few weeks in Mythic progress, you don't really accept someone who doesn't have experience of the current tier. Maiden. Oh, that's the point. Yeah, that might be holy damage. But anyway, we don't use resistance gear anymore, so it'd be irrelevant, even if Maiden did do holy damage, which it might do, actually. I haven't actually looked at it. Because if it's spell damage, it will... It's either holy or fire. I would imagine it's holy. But we don't... We simply don't use... I won't... No. I'll... You might have to watch this again, John. Sorry. It's probably not a good idea just to keep going over and over again. Or... If afterwards you want to watch like the streams, always get saved as videos in my video section. If you go to Friday's stream, I think I was talking about it at the beginning. I mean, I've been talking about every stream since, but I think it was at the beginning specifically of the Friday one. For which I will also be doing another Friday one, not this week, but probably next week, because I think whenever I miss one out, which I will have to miss out next Wednesday stream, at least, then... in that situation, then I'll probably try and put on a Friday one as well. There's no way BFA will be up until at least August. I don't think it'll be up by August. I think much later. The fact that Blizzard are saying that, first of all, beta's not out yet, and it's not coming out until next year. They're not even saying in the new year. They're just saying early 2018 for the beta. That could mean any time in the first 3 months. I would still expect January, but who knows? The other thing is, they've said it is their aim to have it out by the end of 2018. That sort of suggests that it might not even come out in 2018. How do I choose a guild to apply to? It is tricky. Obviously, my first priority is it one that you can comfortably get cutting edge? It's not easy to say for certain, because you can look at a guild's current world rank, but then you might look at the previous ones and you might say, well, is this a guild that's sort of moving in that direction, or is it maybe moving back down or something like that? You know, how they performed in one tier is nothing more than a rough estimate to how they might perform in the next one. It can be hundreds of ranks different. Then you just have to start thinking what's important. One is that they want a Retribution Paladin. 2 is that they don't have a massive roster. 3, because especially at the start of a tier, you're going to find it difficult to break into a guild that uses a large roster, because you're not going to get the tier gear because you're trial. So, and if the tier gear is needed, like the tier gear for me is going to be worth a massive amount of damage. Without it, I'll fall behind the people who are getting that tier gear. So the start of an expansion is when there's the most... it's a really bad time to join a guild in some ways. In some ways it's quite good, in some ways it's bad. Because there's a really massive change of gear. Like after the first 4 weeks, it sort of settles down a bit. You get an upgrade now and then. The first 4 weeks is when there's a sudden... and you hate... Like haste for me is I'm particularly attuned to. My haste will yo-yo up and down all over the place, because I'll be changing gear every raid. Well, I won't, because I'll be in a new guild. I'll be just getting what I coin. So I'll already be getting behind. So I'll be on a trial period. I'll be getting behind already because my gear will just be getting behind just because of that. And I just have to hang on in there and hope that I get some nice coins or get some good off-cut that no one else wants. In a guild that doesn't do split runs, for example... which is possible to end up in, it's even harder to get that gear. Really tough. So, and then after that, of course, one of my things that I insist on is that it has got a good. I'd be very wary of places that don't have a friendly atmosphere. I would be willing to sacrifice quite a lot of progress as well to be Alliance rather than Horde, but I've given up on that now. It's going to be Horde. So, yeah. I'm going to have to do what Sylvanas says. When looking at a guild, do you go for a heroic run with them? No, there's the best way to judge the atmosphere, because guilds don't do that really, or very rarely. The best way to do it is, because I can't anyway, I can't do a heroic with them, because they're going to be the opposite faction. The best thing is to try and see if anyone streams. Like, you try and ask if anyone streams, if they do, if their videos get saved, if they've got like Twitch Prime or whatever it is that you need, or Twitch Turbo, I can't remember. One of the Twitch subscriptions that means that your videos get saved. And then I'd try and watch one of them. I'd ideally watch some on progress. Like, you can watch a kill video if they don't put music over it. The problem is, though, that's the kill. So that's where things are going well. So if they're not screaming at each other, well, that doesn't really tell you that they don't scream at each other. So what you ideally want is a stream of some progress and see what it's like when it's not going well. If they were the same faction, I mean, I don't think it's standard to do that. Because again, I mean, the thing is with the heroic, it's more, especially at this point, it's more of a bit of a laugh. So no one's going to get really unpleasant in it, because why would they? It's just something you breeze through for whatever reason. I mean, if you did see people being unpleasant in it, then yes, you would definitely run to the hills, because God knows what they're going to be like in the pressure. You want to see what they're like in the pressure of a tough progress boss. Yeah, if they did shout at each other during a kill, again, that would be on you. Even guilds with some toxic players in it are unlikely to have that when it's going. They're usually just people who are not good at coping with stress. So usually it just comes out when they're under stress, which means that things are not going well. But when things are, then, you know. And the problem is, like, on the kill video as well, let's say they do say something which could be construed as not being very nice. It could just be banter. You don't really know. But it is from an atmosphere point of view, it is difficult. I mean, one thing I do, is try and ask if anyone is familiar with a particular guild. But if they're not, well, it's no great surprise, because most of the people I would ask are Retribution Paladins. And by definition, if they know about that guild, it's because they're in it. And then I don't really... Although some guilds do have 2 Retribution Paladins, I don't really want to be part of 2 if I can help it. I mean, it'd probably be okay for Antorus. I mean, there was a weird one yesterday I was saying in the stream, where someone said, and I'd forgotten to do this, I have to admit, a bit stupid, oh, go and check out the Discord. And I thought, oh yeah, that's the point. The Paladin Discord actually does have a recruitment section. So I thought, well, let's see. It's not a case of competition. The whole raid is my competition. I don't see other Rets as competition in a raid. I see every other DPS in that raid as competition. It's simply the fact that in Tomb of Sargeras particularly, you didn't bring anything really. You know, there was bops on Mistress Azine, sort of Mythic Kil'jaeden a little bit. By and large, you didn't bring anything special. So you're already occupying that small number of raiders you take along that doesn't bring... Because you take in people, first of all, who bring some utility that's going to be useful on that boss. Then you've got a few places left over for just whoever. And when you're in that pool, you don't want that pool any larger. But yeah, the competition is all the other DPS of whatever class. Simple as that. Is there a way to check a guild's roster from tier to tier? You could try and have a look at what the roster was for first kills of key bosses on WoW Progress. Or you could look on their, or look at the dates they did it and then go to their logs if their logs are public. Not everyone has public logs. Most should at a reasonable level. But yeah, that was it. Yeah, so I went to the Paladin Discord, looked in the thing, and there was a guild saying looking for melee and ranged DPS. Now that means they're not looking for healers and they're not looking for tanks. So when you put that in the Paladin Discord recruitment section, you're thinking, well, they can only be looking for Retribution Paladin then. And okay, you guess they're probably putting it in other class Discords as well, or the ones they're allowed to. But you think, well, at the very least, they're open to a Retribution Paladin. Otherwise, why go to the trouble of putting it in the Paladin one? So I had a look at them, and I had a look at their roster, and they had 2 Rets already. Well, I thought only a madman would take 3 Rets, even in Antorus. So, have I got all the Paladin legendaries? No. I have all the Ret ones. I've had those for quite a while. I don't have all the Paladin ones. I can't remember how many I still need. I think it's either 4 or 5. It's quite a few. I don't do a lot of stuff. I don't do a lot of Mythic Plus these days. So that's one major source. Raiding wise, I mean, I do the Heroic still. That would change if I went Horde, because the Saturday afternoon Heroic ones that Fardian puts on, well, they're for Alliance, so that would be no good anymore. But, no, I mean, it wouldn't really matter anyway. Because, I mean, I don't get excited by these legendary legendary tokens that you can get, because because it'd probably be for a spec that I don't even play, or a class I don't even play. It's Saturday afternoon. Sorry, I do a stream on Saturday afternoons, or from my point of view, Saturday afternoons. And for the last few weeks, last month or so, Fardian, who's the Icy Veins Ret Paladin guide writer, he's been organising pug raids on his Alliance Warlock. I think he plays Horde on his Paladin, but Alliance Warlock. So I've been going to those, just for the sake, if nothing else, of getting the AP and a slim chance of a Titan Forged niceness. But yeah, that's Alliance. So if I went Horde, then that would be gone. Wouldn't be doing that. As well as having to occupy boring buildings. It'd also mean, I mean, again, I shouldn't be thinking too much about the next expansion right now, because that's like a year away. But I do. And I'm thinking, if I'm hoarding the next expansion, not only have I got to do Zandalar, I would much rather do Kultiras. I'd have to do Zandalar. I'm going to miss out on a lot of the Jaina story. I mean, I'm sure Nobble will catch me up on it. And I'm still going to have to put up with boring buildings. And I don't like trolls either. Like, I've never really liked the troll raid. Like, Zul'Gurub I thought was fun as a raid, but I didn't like the style of it, this sort of troll style. You know, and I never liked Zul'Amat. Any sort of trolley-related stuff, I don't like it. Can't be doing with it. But that's what I'm going to have to spend all my time levelling up in. Isn't it weird that there's been no big MMO release lately? Well, I don't know. I mean, how many big MMO releases have there ever been, really? There's not that many, is there? Like, since World of Warcraft, should we say. It depends what you class as a big one. But, I mean, you had Lord of the Rings Online. You had Age of Conan. Age of Conan was the second MMO I played. It was the first one I played after WoW, which I didn't really get into. Star Wars The Old Republic, Wildstar. Warhammer Online, I initially would have had a lot of hype, but it was a complete turnip. It was good for the PvP, but that was about it. Yeah, Final Fantasy XIV, Rift, Guild Wars and Guild Wars 2. Obviously Elder Scrolls Online more recently, Black Desert Online. Would you call Eve an MMO? I don't know whether that classes or not. But I don't think there's not been a huge number of them. So the fact that you only, and especially now, a lot of those were sort of, you know, that you'd expect fewer of them because as a genre, it's a little bit. Yeah, I thought Eve is a different type of thing, but I don't know whether it really fits. But certainly there's not been that many. Recent, like it's been MMOs in general. I don't think it's just as well the number of players has been spread out over more games. I think there's a view that as a genre, it's not as, there's certainly no growth in the area. If you want to bring out a new MMO, you're going to have to nick customers off someone else, I think is the view. Obviously, something like Elder Scrolls Online had the benefit that they would probably also attract Elder Scrolls players who may not play MMOs. And I know this because when it was getting ready to release, I was quite busy on the forums, and there were a lot of Elder Scrolls fans who you could tell just don't like the concepts of MMO. They just wanted Elder Scrolls 6. And the way they were talking, I was sort of explaining, you know, the things that be in it, blah, 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 because it's MMO. And they're going, no, 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 it can't have that. It's got to be different. It's got to be different. What they were basically wanting was a completely single-player experience. They didn't seem to understand the concept of playing with other people in the game. But nonetheless, some of them may have been won over, so they probably would have had quite a lot of those. Higher Heracles. Neverwinter Nights is getting a remake, is it? I wonder what that would be like. I would quite like a good Dungeons and Dragons MMO. Dungeons and Dragons Online, I played for like an hour and I thought, I'm not playing this a minute longer. I thought it was appalling. Absolutely dreadful. So I would quite like a good Dungeons and Dragons MMO. I think. And again, it's one that, if done right, could attract. Because that's what you ideally want, isn't it? You want one... Because as I say, if you just bring up an original MMO, you've basically just got to nick players off other MMOs. You're not really going to get a lot of new players to the genre. Unless it's for a franchise that will appeal to people from that. Which again means you're going to need a license from someone who has that. Now there's already a Star Wars one. I don't think a Harry Potter MMO would do very well, so they can forget about that. Star Trek Online, I didn't even mention in that one because that was another turnip of a game, wasn't it? I didn't even play that, but I don't think it did very well. I think the only reason it may have even registered was simply because it was Star Trek. I think that was it. Neverwinter was quite good. It is really old now. But yeah, it would be. I mean, there's plenty of like MMOs that have come back, aren't there? Where they've had remakes done. I mean, like EverQuest and RuneScape, which keep coming back. Ah, but it's where you get the capital from, Guybrush. That's the thing. Where do you get that starting capital? It's sort of saying an MMO with high enough... Yeah, I mean, yeah, if someone came up with a really good model for an MMO and had plenty of capital to get it going, I'm sure it could be successful. But who's going to risk it? You know, it doesn't... It's no good convincing someone that you can get a return, a profit on this money you're investing. They need to know that it's the best return they can get. And if they think they can put it into a different type of game and get a better return, then that's what they will do. I mean, I would have thought MMOs were actually a really good model for games because if you think about the amount of time it takes, you know, if you're just designing games and charging like whatever, $50 for them, $60, and there's only like 30 hours of gameplay in it or something, isn't it better to design one where, because once you've set it up as well, you've got the massive investment in it to begin with, and then after that, you know, the investment is less for the new content because you can build on the game that already exists. I would have thought that was just a better model, but it's not seen as it, is it? Well, yeah, the what was it? What's it? Oh, I've forgotten now. I've put into it myself. Ashes of Creation. I mean, it's one of those things that, again, there's an awful lot of hype about it. I think people, it's almost like there's people that want to like MMOs that just don't like MMOs, I think. Because there seems to be a lot of people get really excited about an MMO and they go, yeah, this is the one that's going to show World of Warcraft how bad it is. And they play it and then they just go, no, it's a load of rubbish. And they just seems to be a significant number of people that just jump from game to game to game, desperate to. It's almost like I think to myself, maybe they should just think they don't like MMOs. And Ashes of Creation, I've got no doubt the hype is there because it's crowdfunded largely. I think the fact that there isn't a major developer behind it, people think, oh well, it's the actual designer getting to call all the shots, therefore it won't have like executive control and decisions, so it will be brilliant. But aren't a lot of demos amazing though? Like, because you're presenting what you want, you know, what you want people to sort of see on it. Yeah, I mean, the idea of the WoW killer came out, as I say, as early as Age of Conan. I remember that coming out, and that was, I can't remember, we were in TBC still? I forget now. But I mean, I played that. It was actually quite good to begin with. I like the first 20 levels on the starter island, Tortage, whatever it was. That was all right. I quite like that. And then it threw you out into the world, and it was just mayhem. Absolute mayhem. Because I was running all over the place, getting quests for everywhere. And I go, oh, quest, get quest, get quest. And then it's like, what? Where am I going? And I just used to wander around having no idea what I was doing. There's no real structure to it. But at the same time, there was no joy in the exploration of it either, because you could just argue, well, it doesn't matter if you know what you're doing. Just go and explore. But there was no fun in it. There was that Korean game as well, wasn't there? Ion. That seemed to be popular for a while. But it sounded hellish to me, because it just sounded like the ultimate grind of a game. I think that was about 10 years ago or so. Or maybe a bit less. Oh, Terror, yeah. But again, a lot of these games, they didn't really stay popular for long. There's nothing groundbreaking about WoW's gameplay. I think where World of Warcraft really cleaned up, first of all, it came at a time, I know in the UK, and I don't know whether it was the same in other parts of the world, I'm guessing yes. In the UK, it came at round about the time that broadband was really exploding. So, I mean, when I got WoW, I'd only had broadband for a few months myself from dial-up. So, cheap broadband was being rolled across the country, which is obviously really good for online gaming. It also came, it was very accessible. It was really easy to pick up and just get playing with it. It already had a large following from the Warcraft games itself. I mean, when you've played an RTS, who wouldn't want to play a game where you can actually just go into those buildings and wander around and stuff like that? And the fact that they really engaged with the community as well. They had a very good relationship with the community. I think all these things sort of fit together. But I wouldn't say there was anything super original about it. It's difficult for me to say because WoW was my first ever MMO. Obviously, I'd played other role-playing games as well. But yeah, I didn't see anything really unique about it. Other than not just right place, right time, but also right attitude. Windows 10. Oh, no. I mean, I deliberately reset Windows 10. It wasn't an update that took it out for me. It's just that I forgot to save it. I've never had a Windows update knacker my WTF folder. Yeah, for me, in fact, I was saying just this morning to one of my students, I mean, before World of Warcraft, I was basically playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle, tabletop game, and going to tournaments, all the rest of it. And then World of Warcraft came out, and then Warhammer just stopped. I went from playing it every week, like several times a week, potentially, and going to tournaments, to never playing it again. Oh my god. I almost thought about doing that Guybrush until, as I say, when I did the reset, touch wood, it is now working a lot better. But I don't really know how long that will last, if it does. I still haven't set up all my profiles yet still as well. But then there was not much point at the moment when I'm sort of thinking of, well, I am likely to be changing Realm anyway. I just need to get it on my main, save the profiles somewhere, and then transfer and then copy them across again. Yeah, I think I played Guild Wars 2 a little. Didn't really get into it too much. I never played Guild Wars though, the first one. But there were quite a few MMOs obviously before WoW. Even though I don't think there could have been much before, when you consider that, again, without broadband, an MMO can't be much fun to play. You hope Windows 11 is free. I don't. I hope I'm not stupid enough. The next time a new Windows comes out, I hope that Windows 10 has stabilised and that I am not enough of a tool to buy the new Windows until I absolutely have to. Like, because I kept getting convinced. Like at work, for example, they put Windows 10 on my computer, on my desk. I don't want it. But they wouldn't take it off. And I keep getting told, in 2020, Microsoft aren't going to support Windows 7 anymore. It's like, well, then take it off in 2020. Don't do it now. But I kept getting convinced. And when I bought the new computer, because I was thinking, well, I'm paying a lot for this computer, I'll probably have to... don't tell me Windows 10 is here forever. That's just cruel. But when... yeah, when I got the computer, I was paying so much for it. I thought, well, it's got to last a few years. Even though I'm always tempted to get a new machine every year. I don't, because that's just wasting money. So I thought, well, you know, all right, we'll get Windows 10. And everyone keeps telling me that it works fine. But it didn't, did it? It has now behaved since I've done this latest reset. It's even let me install Star Wars The Old Republic, which it was not doing before. Have I ever played Rift? No, I watched someone play it. It's a friend of mine who was trying to get me into it a little bit. But I think at the time I just didn't have time because I was actually quite busy with other stuff. It's not that I was particularly put off by what they were trying to tell me. It was one of those... It's a little bit like Morrowind. Like everyone with Elder Scrolls games goes mad about Morrowind, which is the third one in the series. And I had a friend who was absolutely mad on it, would talk about it all the time. And under normal circumstances would have been able to convince me to play it because he's the same person that got me into Warcraft and he's the same person that got me into Baldur's Gate. So I would absolutely have taken his recommendation. But at the time, I was playing World of Warcraft and that sort of put the kibosh on anything, really. I mean, I've not played any of the Elder Scrolls games. That's the thing. Like sometimes I think to myself, maybe I should play Skyrim because they keep re-releasing it. In fact, I think there's amongst Elder Scrolls players, there seems to be an attitude that Elder Scrolls 6 just isn't coming. All they're going to do is keep releasing special editions of Skyrim. But then I think to myself, well, in the situation I'm in now, I spend a lot of time on World of Warcraft. I would like to... I can't even... Like, I would like to play Elder Scrolls Online. I would like to play Lord of the Rings Online. I would like to play Star Wars The Old Republic. I don't even have time for one session on each of those games a week. So why go out and try and get another game? That would just be mad. You're doing old... reputation grinds is never something I've liked. I'd like... The only reputation I got exalted, the ones you would naturally get. I'm trying to think. I suppose... I mean, obviously, there's the odd one you have to farm. Like recently with Army of the Light. So that we could get the permanent augment rune. What's the other one? Oh, Gussian Reach, so that you can get the whistle updated for Argus. But generally speaking, unless there's something you sort of have to, I don't like doing that. So there's plenty of reps that I never really did. Right now we're releasing Windows 10, and because Windows 10 is the last version of Windows, we're all still working on Windows 10. That was the message from Microsoft employee Jerry Nixon. Thanks, Jerry. Great. Well, I suppose it means they can't make anything even worse. A really weird concept to think there are RPG players who haven't played in Elder Scrolls Online. Well, when you say that, it's like there are people who to this day still... I know people who haven't seen Star Wars, any of them. That never ceases to amaze me. These people exist. And I'm not talking about people who have no interest in fantasy. I'm talking about people who quite like science fiction, quite like fantasy, you know, never seen Star Wars. How baffling is that? Well, a lot easier to play single player games alongside WoW. I'm not really sure because I play those other MMOs as single player games. So, you know, I haven't really done much in terms of the old MMO side of it very recently. Well, if they're going to keep re-releasing newer versions, like updated versions of Skyrim, then it's the sort of thing I can always wait for. It won't kill me to wait a bit. Because the problem is, let's say I really like Skyrim, maybe then I'm persuaded to get other Elder Scrolls games. I can probably do without that. No, I just got told lots and lots about it by this friend of mine who was... It was like, I've never heard him be so excited about a game as he was at the moment. But as I say, would have, under normal circumstances, I'd have gone out and bought the thing and tried it myself. But it's... Have I played non-fantasy ones? No. I'm not really a fan of non-fantasy games at all. Sometimes even when they're the same. Do you know, like when Warcraft was out, I absolutely loved Warcraft. Same friend had Command and Conquer, and, you know, and he got me to try and play that. Couldn't get into it. Not like it. Don't like it. Because for some reason... Even when the principle is very much the same, if you can basically design two games that are basically the same game, if one of them is a decent fantasy game, the other one's a decent sci-fi game, I probably like the fantasy version and I won't like the sci-fi version, which I don't understand, but that's just the way it is. I've never really liked, like even Star Wars: The Old Republic, which has elements, because Star Wars is a fantasy sci-fi, it's elements of both. It's the fantasy elements I like. So, you know, there's no doubt about it, my main character will be Jedi or Sith because of the lightsabers, because that's fantasy. It will, even though I will play the characters that shoot the guns, not so interested with those. See you later, Pinky. Yeah, Morrowind was released at the time when single player was the... I mean, when was it released? Because I say, when this friend was telling me about it, was not necessarily when it had just come out. Because when he was going on about it, hold on. What's it saying? Is this accurate? 2003? No. That's not right. Go on, Wikipedia, don't fail me now. 2002. So it's quite likely that when he was talking to me about it, it had been out for a few years. Because I'm pretty sure I was playing World of Warcraft at the time. Had he told me about it in 2002 or even 2003, or let's face it, even 2004, then I probably would have done, because at the time there wasn't any other computer game that I was playing like mad. You know, I was playing Warhammer, but you can't do that all the time because that's a physical game. So I absolutely would have done. So it must have been several years old. Maybe it was several years old before he came across it. Probably was. Because yeah, I remember that I was playing World of Warcraft, and that was it. That was it. That just took over every other hobby I had. But no, I don't know what the reason is, but I only really like fantasy games. Never really any others, and not really sci-fi ones. The closest I came to like sci-fi games that I like, it was like Elite. And then there was another game that was not dissimilar, like a more modern one, which is X2. I was sort of playing that before World of Warcraft as well. Yeah, I've not played Witcher 3. Again, it's just every time, you know, you look at a game and you think, oh, well, a lot of people think that's quite good, maybe I should get it. I just think to myself, I already have games I don't have time to play that I would like to play. You know, it's literally the case. If I won the lottery and gave up my job and just went full-time doing this, I still probably wouldn't have time to play other games because, you know, there's 4 MMOs I would quite like to play. Every now and then I do play Baldur's Gate through again. You thought for months that this would be the first WoW expansion since Wrath that you played all the way through without a break, but you got burnt out. Oh. It's also going to be the longest expansion, come what may now, really. Because I need to check on some of them, but I'm pretty sure there hasn't been an expansion that's lasted more than a couple of years. The first 3... well, I suppose it depends. Like Vanilla, it's sort of obviously it would have done because in North America it came out in like November. Well, it's the 13th anniversary, isn't it? So it came out in North America then. But in Europe it was out for 22 months. So that would have been out for more than 2 years. Well, let's have a look. Let's see if there's a nice handy little table we can find. If I just put in release dates of World of Warcraft expansions. Is anyone... let's go to images, see if anyone's made a nice little table of them. Oh yeah, they have, sort of. Right, I'm just going to move this here so that I'm not craning my neck. So, actually, no, what am I doing? Let's just put it on the screen so everyone can see. I shall assume these are accurate, by the way. I might notice if some are not. Oh, you just copied them all there. Well, let's see if we can get a nice little table, at least. Right, okay, so... sorry, Jaina, let's just... there we go. So, oh, this is just expansion announcements, not the actual expansions. Oh, well, that was a bit of a fail. Right, I need to read more carefully. All right, well, let's just go with what you've said. So, Burning Crusade, January 2007, that sounds right. Wrath, November 2008. So that was 22 months. I know the first few were 22 months. Wikipedia has a table, does it? Oh, yes, it does. Right. Right, we'll try it again. There we go. So, 22 months there, and then, oh, that's actually 25 months, isn't it, from Wrath to Cataclysm. I wasn't playing at the end of Cataclysm, but that's 25 months. And then December to September, so that's like 21 months. And then September to November is 26 months for MOP. November to Legion was, I suppose it depends, because really that's like 1st of September, but we might again say about 22 whatchamacallits, months. So Legion, I mean, it's got, I think it's got to be more than, it's got to be at least 26 months. And possibly more. Legion launch. So, I mean, it might not even come out in 2018. It's not even guaranteed to come out then. You'd sort of think it would. The only time we'll have any rough idea is when they bring out, which won't happen for a very long time, the advance order, because on the advance order they provide a date by which at the latest it will be available, because they have to, and then you can just probably knock a couple of months off that and see where they're actually aiming for. I don't think it's sad that we're not getting expansions faster, because I don't like it when they bring out expansions, because they feel the need to keep changing so many aspects of it. Like, we get new levels, and you know, they feel the need to change classes and specs and stuff like that. So if it was like in some games where an expansion was basically just new content, more like that we would call a patch, that would be better. I would like that, you know, but it's like they feel the need to change things all the time, even when something's fine. Won't we get bored then? And Taurus, then Ashara. What'll keep us entertained until next November? Well, they will have to bring some stuff out. They can't. I mean, another raid. There will be another raid. Oh, thank you very much, Alinov. Sneaky way of getting the top chair. That's no problem at all. Yeah, so I don't know what is coming, and I don't know where there's going to be a cut-off in terms of easing up on it. I still am convinced that there will be another raid, not a tier raid, of course, a smaller raid, but that there will be something. They're just like tips. Bullet points is sales factor number one. Yeah. Well, you say for some reason, what happened every time that they like announce a new expansion? What do they have to do? They have slowly zooming on a piece of scenery with level cap raised to blah, 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 120 this time. So many new zones, so many new quests, so many this, so many that, and then a few features as well. If it was just the new features and the new quests and zones, I'd be more than happy with that as an expansion. You know, I don't need them to keep changing the way the class. There are some MMOs where the way the class plays hardly changes at all. It only changes when there's a clear problem. I don't know why they don't feel, why they feel they have to change everything up to the point where people expect it. People now well, they have done for some time, think, so what's going to be happening with this class or that class in the next expansion? You know, people asking me, which I will do because it's worth doing. What are the things you're hoping of for Retribution Paladins in the next expansion? Because they know that Blizzard are going to mess them about with them. It's just a case of what they're going to do. And it's all right saying that it's not going to be as big a change up as Legion. Well, it hardly could be as big a change up as Legion because that was, you know, savage in its changes. Maybe we'll get the Windows 10 treatment and get no more level increases. Well, we know we are. We know it's going up to 120. Quite what the effects that is on a new player, I can't imagine. I'm not sure it'll be going on for as long as 2084. It's I think survival hunters. I really don't think they're going to change. They're going to change them. What made Paladins so good in WoD? They weren't always brilliant. They were good for some things. I think what it was is you had that, and it wasn't just in the last tier where you had the charges of Avenging Wrath. They were very good for on-demand bursting things down. So when there were a load of ads that just had to be killed really quickly, or an ad that came in that had to be killed really quickly, Paladins were really good at that. Retribution Paladins were really good at that. So overall damage, sometimes good, sometimes not. But in terms of when the damage had to be done, if you looked on the logs during that period, the Retribution Paladin would be on top. Or should have been. Demon, I know, I think there's a... The thing is, the Demon Hunter getting 2 specs sort of it's a bit of a hint for me that if they were designing WoW again, they probably wouldn't have as many DPS specs per class. You know, it wouldn't surprise me if they hate the fact that your hunters, mages, warlocks, and rogues all have 3 DPS specs. I think that annoys them. But will the expansion after BFA have a new class and will it be ranged? If there is a new class, it has to be ranged. I think that there won't be a new class though. I think what they're going to try and do is go more into the allied races type thing. But of course, who knows? Who knows? But it's got to be arranged. The only thing is, like when we're trying to think of what could it be, the only class I can think of that hasn't been in the game yet is Necromancer, because there were Necromancers in Warcraft. The problem is, if you think about what the abilities of Necromancers are, it's a cross between a Warlock and a Demon, a Death Knight, sorry. And you can already imagine it from the Warlock's point of view. You know, so Warlocks playing back from vanilla have already gone through a couple of expansions, then suddenly Death Knights come up. Oh, by the way, we'll be wanting some of your abilities, please, Warlock, to give to the Death Knight. What? And then carry on for a little bit longer. And then Demon Hunters come along. Oh, by the way, we need some of your Demonology abilities, please. We'll just take those away from you there. Give them to the Demon Hunters. So if you were to sort of suggest there's going to be Necromancers in WoW, I should think all the Warlocks will go and hide under a rock. Do I think there's way too many melee? Yes. God, yes. It's absolutely ridiculous how many melee there are. Because you've got 12 classes. 9 of them can be melee. 6 of them have to be melee. If they're going to DPS, 6 have to be melee. Chemistry. Can a healer throwing potion on the head of people? Could be an outraged. So as a healer, it'd be your job to run around smashing bottles on people's heads to heal them. That's like in Star Wars: The Old Republic, where I couldn't believe this when I first did it. Like when I rolled a bounty hunter, and then found out they could be a healing class of the spec, but the way you healed people was by shooting them. And it's like, what is this? I'd be fine if Paladins got a disciplined priest type healing spec. That would, you know, like half and half, so half damage, half healer, like Discipline Priest, but melee based. I mean, you could argue it might not be as effective as a Discipline Priest on raid bosses sometimes, which could be a bit of an issue. Or maybe they have ranged options that make them a little bit less effective in emergencies. Don't know. But that's, you know, that's the sort of thing I would quite like to see. But I don't think Blizzard will do it. I think the only reason they've done it for Discipline Priest is because they sort of had to. Because they've committed to it. Priests have 2 healing specs, Holy and Discipline. Holy, it's sort of fairly straightforward. You can do stuff with that. But the... No, Shockedin should be something different. They should make Shockedin an actual range spec. Paladin should have 10 specs. I can think of loads of different specs. But yeah, they had to do it with Discipline Priests because all that Discipline Priests were in WoD were people that like just... There were some people that would just go around the raid, clicking and putting bubbles on them. Shield, 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 shield. And when they got to the end of it, it was time to start again because the shields were running out. And they just did that. I'm not saying that the good ones did that. But that's what plenty of them just did. We'll just make... And they used to go mad at anyone who put a shield on themselves. If it was another priest in the raid and they put a shield on themselves, they used to go mental. A healer whose healing spells have a range of 6 yards. Oh my god, that'd be hell on earth, wouldn't it? A cleric class with a ranged DPS and 2 healer specs. No. You already got clerics. I mean, melee, healers have sort of seem okay. They've got a decent number of classes and specs. And... you know, so healers I think are fine. And you can generally use them as well. Tanks, on the other hand, they've got a decent range of specs, but it's too many when your basic roster only really needs 2 tanks. Maybe a third that's tank stroke DPS. Well, it is annoying that if you're going to have an imbalance in your melee ranged roster, that you'd rather the imbalance be in favour of ranged, and yet there's only 3 classes that have to be ranged, and there's only 6 classes that even can play ranged. And at any one time, some of those may not be that good, because of the 3 that have, you know, ranged options. So Hunters, okay, they're always going to be okay. Shadow Priests are generally good. You know, they don't generally have a bad tier, but they can. And Elemental Shamans, it's just totally in the lap of the gods with those. They're, you know, sometimes they're good for some fights. So your idea for a Tinker then would be like the Goblin... What is it? There's a Goblin Engineering quest in Dalaran where you basically go around Dalaran shooting Kirin-Tor guards with bandages. Outlaw Rogue, use a gun and be a combo point hunter. Possible. The thing is, though, that rogues don't usually suffer from being melee. They're classed as some... They're sort of outside of the normal melee restrictions, aren't they? Because I've even seen guilds advertise for looking for a melee DPS, looking for a ranged DPS, and looking for a rogue. You know, because they're doing a totally different thing. Because the things that screw melee over don't always screw rogues over. Now you're making it sound, Mahal, as if you'd be introduced in a class that can be played by gnomes. Now that I think about it, that would be a bad idea. But it would also sound, Gaz, a bit too much like survival hunters with their traps. You're just replacing the traps with bombs. So, well, rogues should be happy. There are very few of them out there, so they can walk into guilds way above where they'd normally expect with any other class. Yeah, that's what I keep saying. If there's anyone, whenever anyone is asking what class should they play, unless they've got a particular attachment to a small number or even one class, you play a rogue. You'd play a rogue even over range DPS. Void rogues. Would that be a thing? I suppose that could be a thing. Yeah. I haven't seen... I suppose people would know, actually, yeah. I haven't actually seen the class things that go with them. I haven't really looked at them until I'm going to play them on, like, beta or something. Your Raiden alt is a rogue, suggested by GM, yeah. Well, mine is at the moment, but only like assassination, like for subtlety. Do you know what was quite hilarious? Someone was linking something in Discord from someone ranting about it. They were an outlaw rogue, and they were going on about how subtlety is an easy spec and people only play it because it's easy. I was like, you what? I tried, because when I was getting my rogue ready for doing a few split runs, you know, I could get the handle of doing assassination all right. Not brilliantly, because I hardly ever play it. But, you know, I can pick it up and do all right with it. But subtlety, I was thinking, this is... You'd actually have to properly practice this. This is going to take some practice to get right. I really don't... So, absolute madness. Anyone who tries describing it as an easy spec is just going to get derisory laughter. Well, you can say, you know, if you want to say that no spec is difficult, sure, but I don't think you can describe any spec as difficult unless you're going to say that sub is. Because the subtleties of it, if you pardon the expression, they're quite significant. You know, every time I was just trying it out and I was thinking, oh, what? And then I was looking at logs of people that do well with it and looking at their... you know, start opening sequence and things and thinking, bloody hell. This is going to take some practice. And I thought, if I was playing it as a main, sure, you're going to put that practice in. And yes, you would get used to it. Fair enough. But just as something I pick up, maybe just play a couple of hours a week. No, I'm not putting that much effort into it. But again, the point is, to play subtlety, you are going to have to practice at it. Whereas assassination, you can... I'm not... You know, obviously if you practice at it, you will get better. But I think you can do okay as assassination. The problem is, I would like... The thing is, if I ever consider changing my main, you've got to understand, like, whenever I come round to changing guilds, I know that I don't have as many, even though, you know, I've been quite lucky in many ways. I've got into guilds where I've enjoyed myself. But I know that I'm at a massive disadvantage because of the spec I play. And I always am, even when it's doing all right. But there is no other class that I would like to play for a long period of time. Do you know those people who change their class every tier? That would be me if I couldn't play Paladin. Because I pick a class at one tier and go, oh, yeah, this is all right, and play it for a bit. And then I get bored with it, or another grass is always greener, another one starts to look better. So I don't know. I don't think they will destroy Retribution. It will just be potentially disappointing. Everyone is disappointed with what they get out of their spec, I think. If there's a particular thing you're hoping they deal with and they don't, even if the overall package is fine, as it was for Legion, you can't help but be disappointed. I was disappointed that instead of trying to make auras and seals work, that they just got rid of them. I was disappointed that they got rid of Hammer of Wrath. even though the overall package for Legion was okay. It was disappointing. I was disappointed with the new mastery. Elemental in Mop. Yeah. It was particularly good on Darumu, Heroic Darumu, for breaking the old ice walls. I came quite a distant second to the Elemental Shaman in our guild on that. Well, the thing is, what is flavour of the month these days? I mean, you could argue they're sort of used to be a thing, because generally speaking, until Legion, Blizzard didn't really monkey about with specs mid-tier, you know, whereas now they do. They say they avoid it, but they don't seem to. So what they used to do is whatever state a spec was in when a new tier opened, that was, you knew that was how it's going to be for the rest of that tier. Unless there was any like major bugs to fix. I don't think they can reduce all classes for 2 specs because, in all seriousness, if they were going to do it, they would do it for the pure DPS classes, and I'm quite sure they would like to. Or I'm fairly sure they would like to. People would go mad. You know, whichever spec got the chop, people would go mad. People were not happy when they changed Combat Rogue to Outlaw Rogue. Even though the generalities of it are similar. Very different abilities, of course, but this sort of style is quite similar in many ways. But you know, people didn't like that at all because, you know, effectively they got rid of a spec. Yeah, if you've got any abilities that can trivialize mechanics, particularly on the tough bosses, then obviously that's really useful to have. Like, it's no benefit, for example, to be able to trivialize a mechanic on one of the easy bosses that you're going to kill in 2 or 3 pulls anyway. That's pointless. So when people said, oh yeah, well, this spec might be good on Fallen Avatar, but your spec's really good on, you know, Harjatan, it's like, yeah, we one-shot Harjatan. Great, thanks. So obviously what you want is you want the abilities that trivialize mechanics on the tough bosses, the ones that are going to take you more than 1 reset. And the argument, I think, Kasasha, with hunters and making survival melee was that the hunter specs before all played in basically the same way. You know, you could actually almost just change what abilities went in which bind and do the same, using the same buttons in the same basic order with all 3 specs. There wasn't a great deal of difference between them. So they wanted to make a difference between them. So Marksman and Beastmaster, there's certainly quite a lot of difference now. And yeah, they obviously felt, well, having to make survival melee. Because hunters did have melee capabilities in vanilla, for example. So that's why they've done it, just to make them all different. Which is also why I think it will stay. Plus the fact that people do like survival hunters, not loads. Probably because they're not largely welcome in raids, because, you know, if you've got 2 perfectly viable range specs, what lunatic would ever play a melee spec, especially when it's new? Like, you can understand enhancement shamans and feral druids because they may have played those for some years. They've been well established for a long time. Whereas survival, because it was new, and so if you're already playing a hunter, it's like, well, why would I go into melee? That's just stupid. Wing Clip, Raptor Strike. There was Mongoose Bites as well, I seem to remember. Disengage was, I think, was a melee ability. But that was also when your bow had a minimum range as well. So, like, you couldn't shoot someone in the face. So if a mob closed into melee combat with you, you had to disengage back to shoot them a bit more, or just try and melee them. So in the end, you just ended up actually trying to get Beastmaster stuff and make sure you had a good tanky pet so that you didn't have to get aggro on something. Because Beastmaster talents were the only ones that really let you let your pet out aggro you. Otherwise you would constantly keep pulling threat. I don't miss any sort of dancing type thing. And I've never really had to do much of it in WoW. I did have to do it in a bit in Warhammer Online with the Chaos Warrior. It was not fun. It's just it's a recipe for getting RSI, really, isn't it? Some Kata. Oh, yeah, I remember Kata. Yeah, I came in at the end of it with Warrior. I think I used to do it with like macros on certain abilities. So I used to macro the stance with certain abilities to change it. I seem to recall. That was probably just a similar. Totem twisting, no. I mean, there was. I mean, in TBC for Rets Horde Rets, there was seal twisting, but I was Alliance, so I didn't have to put up with that. At the same time, it also allowed them to a lot more damage than I would have been able to do. Even though I did plenty good damage, so it was fine. So I can only imagine the Horde Rets were absolutely steaming it. I have very bad recollections of Gurthalak because the heroic version, which was what we'd call mythic now, just didn't drop until like a couple of weeks before the expansion. You know, we were farming Dragon Soul for so long because the end tier was out for so long. Heroic version never would drop for me. So I was stuck with the normal version. Until right at the end, when it really didn't matter because you'd replace it fairly quickly. The annoying thing is as well, like when we finished it, after a couple of weeks of farming, there were quite a few players who couldn't be asked farming it for the rest of the expansion. So the Guildmaster, it's not something I would agree with, but he said to them, well, I'll tell you what, just go on holiday then, come back for the next expansion. And the rest of us basically did 10-man, but we did it in split, like we'd mix up, we'd basically do split runs. So we would have a mixture of alts and mains and do 2 runs a week, or sometimes 3. So, like, sometimes Gurthalak, would drop in the other one. That was always annoying when I was on my DK, or which was annoying when my DK had it, or my Hunter, which couldn't use it. Because by that time, not everything was actually a Hunter weapon. Although I still could have equipped it. But, yeah, I was hugely, hugely annoyed by that. The not dropping at all. Best swords never seemed to drop for me. I never got the pizza one, the pizza paddle, the one that dropped off killed Jaden in TBC. Even though we were farming that for quite a while, we killed that nice and in very good time. Soul Render, I can't remember the name of it now. Apollo, no, can't remember. But the one that looks ridiculous. And but now it doesn't matter. You don't even think about getting Bisgear now because you can't. Titan Forging makes it quite impossible, so you can forget all about it. Even Warforging and random sockets basically did in WoD. You miss weapons with procs. Well, yeah, I mean, we'll have to see what they do. You know, if Blizzard have the same concerns about Titan Forged weapons. Oh, excuse me, it doesn't sound like they do. So I think we are going to have to put up with the scourge of Titan Forged weapons and hope to be lucky. And if we can't be lucky, hope that no one else in our raid is lucky. It's all relative with weapons. But But yeah. Right, so we've come to the roughly 2-hour mark. So I'll do the usual thing. We'll give it a few more minutes if people want to throw something else in there. And then we'll call it a close there. I need to do the WoW Flash coming out for tomorrow. And also render this, as well as carry on looking at guilds. Let's get rid of this actually while we're here. Draenor EU Horde, yeah, but I've not seen any on there really looking. I know that that's the largest Horde PvE realm on EU. But there's not many guilds full stop looking. I don't think there's anyone specifically looking for Retribution Paladins, which is what surprises me. I don't think there's any guild specifically looking for Rets. There are some looking for DPS that are open to Rets, but none that are specifically looking for Rets. Because there are some where you think they are in WoW Progress, but actually when you contact them, it turns out they're not. They just haven't updated their stuff. You know, and it is sometimes a pain in the arse to update it. Jaina plus Sylvanas duel at the end of the expansion. I don't know. I don't know that Jaina has any particular hatred for Sylvanas other than that she's Horde. So I don't know that they're actually mortal enemies insofar. I mean, more likely Sylvanas against, you know, Gen. That's, yeah, the Soul Render, that's right. There was a number of other weapons there. Yes, it did drop off Kill Jaden. Absolutely it did. Because he wouldn't drop it for me. But what did I have in the end? I had that trash polearm rubbish, which didn't even look like a paladin type weapon. I don't know. They can't keep killing off major characters. I mean, they can. The other thing is with Greymane, you see, here's the issue: who's going to be the leader of the Worgen? There aren't very many notable. Unless they big one up, there aren't very many notable characters. There are some that you will know about if you've played a Worgen and therefore gone through the Worgen quest. But in terms of ones that would be, you know, known more widely, I don't think there really is much. I don't think Fiona is going to take over as a Worgen leader somehow. She's a bit of a traveller. Apart from anything else, she's not even Holy Alliance because, you know, when you first come across her in that appalling quest in Plaguelands, she has an Alliance and a Horde helper because you've got a Blood Elf with her as well as a Dwarf, hasn't she? The problem with the Soul Render sword is it looks more like something that you use to remove pizzas from an oven. So yeah, I can see Greymane being okay, even though he seems quite reckless and fairly suicidal. I just can't see anyone else. I mean, apart from anything else, we'd have to think about where they're even going to set up. I suppose they would have the opportunity to make another Worgen more prominent because at the moment they are stationed in Darnassus. Well, that's going to be a little bit warm for them soon. So when will I make that video with my banks and what old items are in it? I said when I hit 15k subscribers. So it's going to be quite a while at this rate at the moment. It's not going up very quickly. But 15k subs, that's when I will do that one. I might just about sneak it by the end of the year, but it's by no means certain. Okay, so I'll call it to a close there. Remember, next week, I'll just have to remind people, it may not be on Tuesday. Obviously, ideally follow me on Twitter. Failing that, then, you know, I will try and mention... Well, if I'm going to change the day, I will mention it in a specific shout video for it, of course. Because it may be early. It may be on the Monday. It may be Thursday. It may be a different day. But it may be Tuesday. But it will be called something different. So if I, you know, talk about another stream called something else, then that's what that's going to be. And but yeah, Twitter's the best place to try and follow me for news of that. But I will obviously try and get the message out on all platforms as well. So thanks very much for coming. I'll do my usual stuff for YouTube people. If you've enjoyed it, don't forget to like, comment. Plenty of stuff to comment about. Subscribe if you haven't already. And share with other people who might also be interested in 2 hours of rambling nonsense while they do their world quests. And until next time, I'll see you later.